That night, Queen Visenya mounted Vhagar and returned to Dragonstone, and it is written that when her dragon passed before the moon, that orb turned as red as blood. Hey there, friends. David Lightbringer here at the kids' table, where all the fun's at least. It's all fun and games until someone, yeah, you know the joke. But seriously, who wants to get stuck eating with the adults at the adults' table, right? I mean, they don't really even know how to have fun after all. They just take everything way too seriously. And kidding aside, what we saw this week was the kids trying to fight like adults and the adults fighting like children. As Rhaenyra said about Alicent, and as Otto said about Rhaenyra, now we see them as they truly are, which is to say that a lot was revealed about the character of many of the characters in this episode. Best of all, at least for those of us with a symbolism-based YouTube channel, the fight with the kids was actually a symbolic miniature of the Dance of the Dragons, a role play of the war to come. That's right, it wasn't just Helena's cryptic mutterings that served as an omen of war this week, and we'll get to those as well. But the entire drama between the children in the cave, as well as the subsequent drama up at the adults' table at Castle Driftmark, a drama which was ultimately settled by a child, Aemond One Eye Targaryen.
Do not mourn me, mother. It was a fair exchange. I may have lost an eye, but I gained a dragon.
Not sure if he's really a child anymore, though, since he claimed Nanny Vhagar. And yeah, you better believe Nanny Vhagar will be dropping by later in the video. So you better put some respect on his name.
So when them man mention my name, I look man. Put some respect on my name. I look man. Put some respect on my name. I look man.
Because he's Aemond Targaryen, and yeah, it's really him.
It's him.
It's me.
In addition to the symbolism, I'll also do a little Targaryen parent corner to sort out which kids were in the right and wrong for their various actions in the fight. And I'll see if I can provoke an even bigger fight in my YouTube comments. All right. So, click that thumbs up button and the subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you'd like to support the channel, then click that join button to become a channel member subsquisher. Yeah, that's right. You get some cool live stream privileges with that, so definitely check that out if you'd like to come to the Sunday night post-game breakdowns, which are, of course, every Sunday night right after House of the Dragon ends. Now let's get started. So yeah, the fight in the beach cave with Aemond against Jacaerys, Lucerys, Baela, and Rhaena was symbolism, my favorite thing. It was a symbolic foreshadowing of the war to come, which will of course be known as the Dance of the Dragons. And shout out to Plato's cave, the original cave metaphor. Now, although the Dance of the Dragons is referred to as a Targaryen civil war between rival branches of the house, at this point in House of the Dragon, you can see that it's actually more of a fight over which of the great houses who have worked their way next to House Targaryen will have their half-Targaryen children claim the legacy and future of House Targaryen and the Iron Throne itself. House Hightower, House Velaryon, or secretly, House Strong. Shh. Those three houses marrying into House Targaryen are represented by the children in the cave. Alicent's son Aemond for House Hightower, of course, Laena Velaryon's daughters Baela and Rhaena for House Velaryon, and Jacaerys and Lucerys for both House Velaryon and House Strong, since they are half-strong by blood, but of course claimed and raised by Laenor Velaryon as his children. Similarly, you can also see this as a fight between Viserys' kids, Daemon's kids, and Rhaenyra's kids, but it's really the other houses that marry into Targaryen that make these factions distinct, in large part because it is the power of those houses which are backing and creating each one of these factions. So, what were all these half-Targaryen children fighting over? Well, Nanny Vhagar, of course, who symbolizes the House of the Dragon as a whole, the legacy, the power, all of it. And that's why I've got the green egg and the green light, not for Team Green, but for the green dragon, Nanny Vhagar. Vhagar is the only dragon alive from Aegon's conquest, of course, and she's the biggest dragon currently alive. So Nana really does make an outstanding representation of the house's dragon power as a whole. And yeah, we're just calling her Nana, straight up, why not? Now, Aemond, of course, was returning to the castle after claiming Vhagar, which was, by the way, my favorite scene of House of the Dragon so far, when he was confronted by the other 4 children. So this would represent the way that House Hightower beat the other 2 houses to the Targaryen throne, in that Viserys could have wed Lady Lena Velaryon after Aemma Arryn died, but instead chose Alicent Hightower to be his queen. Now the Hightowers are first in line to seize power outright if the Targaryen heir Rhaenyra stumbles, and they're also there to help her stumble, of course. And this is especially true now that they have Vhagar on their side. So the first people to confront Aemond, and also the first people to shove and punch, were Rhaena and Baela, who represent House Velaryon. This would symbolize how the Velaryons were the next family to get close to the dragon's throne, both by way of Laenor wedding Rhaenyra, and by way of Laena wedding Daemon. And this initial conflict between the Velaryon and the Hightower faction in the cave might also represent the way that Corlys and Otto have been enemies for years. Next, we see Harwin's sons, Jace and Luke, enter the fight to help the girls, and indeed, Harwin did come to the aid of Laenor and Rhaenyra as a surrogate father who kept their secrets and looked out for the kids as best he could. And it's no spoiler to tell you that when the war does break out, which is going to be happening pretty soon here, House Velaryon does indeed stand with Rhaenyra and Daemon and their children against the Hightower-dominated Green faction, just as Jace, Luke, Baela, and Rhaena are fighting together against Aemond. I say this isn't a spoiler because, of course, these battle lines are very clearly drawn up at the adults' table inside the castle at the end of the episode, when the 2 factions are facing off against one another across the room, with only the feeble King Viserys standing in between them alone. It's barely symbolism at this point. I mean, these people are literally ready to start killing one another right now. Like if Viserys had just had a heart attack right then and there, because he had just watched his wife stab his daughter, because his grandson put out his son's eye, and this after his wife tried to start a treasonous Kingsguard mutiny because she was mad about his daughter's treasonous lies about the paternity of his grandchildren, which are also Viserys' own lies, by the way. And I know that was a mouthful, but that's what Viserys just watched. And if he had keeled over then and there from shock, the fighting would have broken out in the room by the time his body hit the floor. In other words, it's only Viserys holding the realm together at this point. But the realm is coming apart about as fast as Viserys' physical body is. The Fissure King. It's like the Fissure King, only with leprosy. All right. Now, as for the cave itself, where the children fought, consider that it is in the catacombs beneath the dragon pit where we find the dragon's eggs, the children of the dragons, in other words. Thus, the cave is an apt place to have the children of House Targaryen and these other 3 houses. I mean, two houses, sorry how strong, do a Dance of the Dragons roleplay. It does also seem like it might be a shout out to Plato's cave metaphor, which is all about political power, and which was directly referenced in Varys' famous speech about power being a shadow on the wall and how power resides wherever men believe it does. And I think it's Aemond alone in this cave who understands what he's doing in terms of power. Rhaena and Baela, for example, have more personal motivations. They're upset about Vhagar being claimed because they were thinking of her as Laena's dragon and as Rhaena's to claim when she was ready. And Jace and Luke are really just there to defend their cousins. Technically, they're aunts. But whatever, they're all cousins when they're kids. Aemond, however, has apparently already absorbed Alicent's outlook that there will be a succession crisis and a war. And he definitely understands that he's just claimed the biggest chess piece on the board from the other side. You can see that by the way that Aemond stares right at Rhaenyra as he speaks of having claimed Vhagar. And by the way that Aemond speaks to Aegon earlier in the episode about Helena being Aegon's queen one day, which implies that Aegon will sit the Iron Throne, which in turn implies that Aemond knows there's going to be a war over the succession. And that conversation was before he claimed Vhagar, which, by the way, he was clearly planning to do all day, and even before he came to Driftmark. You can see that as Aemond stares up at the sky during the day, looking for Vhagar, then waiting for the sun to go down, and then making his move to the beach specifically to go claim her. You can also see his intention in the way that he stops and gathers up his courage before making that final sprint up to Vhagar. So he definitely wasn't just wandering the beach and accidentally wandered up to Vhagar and then decided to claim her. That this was the reason why he went down to the beach. So Aemond had this whole thing planned, but didn't tell anyone, and then had the courage and the initiative to go claim her right off the beach, right under the noses of the enemy. So yeah, it's really him.
It's him.
It's me.
And just as Aemond goes it alone here claiming Vhagar and then fighting against the other 4 kids, there is a certain part of the war to come where Aemond will sort of fly solo. I won't say more so as not to spoil anything, but that too is foreshadowing, and of course Fire and Blood readers will know the part I'm talking about. So yeah, it's a symbolic foreshadowing roleplay thingy, and we love those. And in fact, now that we've had a couple more episodes, I can tell you that Rhaenyra and Laenor's wedding dance was also foreshadowing for the Dance of the Dragons. I mean, how not, being a literal dance of dragon people. For example, Daemon dances with Laena and then Rhaenyra, just as he marries Laena and then Rhaenyra. And right before Daemon cut in to dance with Rhaenyra, she had just been dancing with Harwin Strong, whom she had, of course, just been having children with before marrying Daemon. Then later, Daemon and Rhaenyra are kissing out on the dance floor.
We can make sandwiches.
Just as the fight breaks out. And that is a parallel for Daemon and Rhaenyra marrying each other right before the war breaks out, and their relationship being sort of right at the center of the war. And then, of course, it's Criston Cole who actually starts the fight. Now, I won't say anything spoilery about what Criston might do in the future, but as you saw tonight, he's a bit of a loose cannon and totally sworn to Alicent and Team Green. So you can imagine how he might help to light the match that sparks off this giant realm full of tinder. No, not that kind of tinder. Speaking of symbolic foreshadowing at the kids' table, we have our young Helaena the Dreamer and freestyle poet. So as the adults and the other grieving children are mingling, Helaena is trapping a spider and composing some verse.
Hand turns new, ball of green, ball of black, dragons of flesh, weaving dragons of thread.
All right, so the dragons of thread would be the banners of war, which are woven by the flesh and blood dragon people of House Targaryen, who have, of course, divided into factions of green and black. There may also be a reference to the idea of the cycles of history turning like a loom here, sort of weaving the fates of all involved into Westeros' story. Now, Helaena is presumably inspired to think in terms of weaving and thread due to her observance of the spider, although there could also be a deeper significance to the spider that I'm not thinking of, so let me know in the comments if you have an idea about that. Now, last week, I mentioned that Helaena gave some kind of prophecy about Aemond claiming his dragon, and this week we saw that come true. So in episode 6, we saw Aemond dragged into the room where Alicent and Helaena were talking after Aemond had just tried to claim a dragon from the dragon pit. And right after Alicent reassures Aemond that you will have a dragon one day, Helaena says quietly and kind of to herself, he'll have to close an eye. So in other words, when an important topic came up, Helaena suddenly got a glimpse of that specific future, and it seems to be the same here on Driftmark, where she catches glimpses of the war banners of the Dance of the Dragons being woven. All the parties are gathered together here, and several important steps towards war were taken here, such as Daemon and Rhaenyra marrying, Alicent attacking Rhaenyra with a knife, the paternity of Rhaenyra's kids being challenged in open court, and of course, Aemond claiming Vhagar. Thus, Helaena can see the sowing of the war banners already, with the spider perhaps influencing the metaphor that she chooses. Now, another interesting thing about Helena's prophecy is that she phrased this as an exchange, closing an eye to gain a dragon. Aemond too speaks in these terms after the incident, saying,
Do not mourn me, mother. It was a fair exchange. I may have lost an eye, but I gained a dragon.
Now, as longtime myth heads and fans of Norse mythology will know, this sounds an awful lot like Odin talk, whether intended as such or not. In the books, George R.R. Martin is having an absolute field day with people losing eyes in exchange for magic power or knowledge, so it may be that some of this has just carried over from the books into House of the Dragon by accident. However, I'd guess that Ryan Condal, a longtime A Song of Ice and Fire fan and a skilled writer, would know the basics of Odin mythology and probably added the Helaena prophecy of Aemond closing an eye to gain a dragon in order to play up this theme of magic having a great cost. And just in case anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, 2 of Odin's most famous stories involve him sacrificing his physical self to gain magic power and knowledge, which is really just a metaphor for living a life of deep spiritual devotion, where the pleasures and desires of the flesh, so to speak, are subsumed to the pursuit of wisdom and enlightenment. One of these stories has Odin plucking out his own eye and casting it into the well of Mimir, in exchange for permission to take a drink from that well, which conveys wisdom and magical knowledge on those who imbibe its waters. That's why Odin is always depicted with one eye, even if he goes in disguise as another person or even an animal. George's version of this metaphor substitutes the magics of his world for drinking from the well of Mimir. But yeah, we see many pursuers of magic walking around one-eyed, such as Bloodraven, who is a green seer, Euron, who's pursuing every kind of magical power he can get his hands on, Waymar Royce, who pursued and challenged the others and then became the first ice-resurrected person in the story, Beric Dondarrion, a fire-resurrected person who's acting as a symbolic stand-in for Azor Ahai, the original flaming sword warrior, and even Jon Snow, a highly magical character who's about to be resurrected and who gained a nasty scar over one eye when Orell's eagle nearly blinded him. Boy, that was a walk down memory lane. Now, I'm sure that you can see how Aemond fits this pattern, right? Since this is so specifically equated as a trade of an eye for a dragon. Dragons are one of the most significant magical powers in the story, perhaps tied with green seer magic. And of course, House of the Dragon is all about people contesting for the power of the dragons. They all want to hold the Dragon Ball of power. They all want to hold the dragon. Okay. So we can say that Aemond, like so many A Song of Ice and Fire characters before and after him, has officially had the Odin makeover and now finds himself a far more powerful magician than before. And by magician, I just mean magic user, not Merlin the magician. Now, as you no doubt noticed, claiming Vhagar definitely puts a new kind of fire into young Aemond. He was already bold and courageous, but he walks into that cave more full of piss and vinegar than ever before and shows no hesitation in talking mad shit to the other kids, even though he's outnumbered 4-1. So just as in the books, we see that bonding with a dragon makes a Targaryen stronger in every sense, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. It's like Mario eating a mushroom. So this is where the big dragon energy, so to speak, comes from. And we see it very clearly with Aemond, who not only courageously takes on his bullies, and yeah, those kids were bullying him, but actually by far getting the better end of the fight until Jace throws sand in his eyes. Aemond truly has leveled up, even if he did pay a wicked price. That is the Odin way, of course, and the A Song of Ice and Fire way. One other mythical astronomy note, in the books, Aemond is one of several characters who have Night's King symbolism. That doesn't mean that Aemond, and listen close, it does not mean that Aemond is the guy who was tied to the tree and made into the Night King. That's not what I'm talking about. The show version of Night King is actually inspired by an old legend from the books of Night's King. And what George likes to do in the books is to take his old mythical figures like Night's King, Azor Ahai, Nissa, Garth the Green, and so on, and use them as archetypes that the characters in the main story parallel through symbolism. So for example, what that means is that all the characters who wield flaming swords either in real life, like Stannis or Beric, or in dreams, which would be Jon, Jaime, and Brienne, are all paralleling Azor Ahai. And the same also goes for Dany, who dreams of dragon lords wielding flaming swords, and who of course wakes the dragons from stone, as per the prophecy. On the other hand, characters like Euron, Stannis, Roose Bolton, and even Jon Snow act as Night's King parallels. And so too does Aemond One Eye, who in the books covers his missing eye with a blue star sapphire, as you can see here in this classic artwork by Darkly Green, and who also wears midnight black armor. Now, of course, the others first came forth during the long night, the long midnight, with eyes that shine like cold blue stars, like a cold blue star sapphire. So you see the symbolism here. And of course, there's a ton more to it, which you can learn about in the video called A New Night's King. I mentioned all this because, as many mythheads noticed, Aemond very conspicuously watches the sun disappear behind the castle right before he went to claim Vhagar. So it may be that Ryan Condal watches all of my videos and is hip to Aemond's Night King symbolism. Or maybe he picked up on it himself. Or maybe it was just an epic camera shot. Point being, put a pin in that, and we'll keep one eye on Aemond One Eye for future Night's King imagery, deed, and symbol. Alright, so as promised, it's Targaryen Parenting Corner. I'm actually trying to put a live stream together for this Friday or Saturday to go more in-depth on this, but I just want to set a couple of things straight, mostly pertaining to Aemond, before we do that. So the first thing to understand, and I've seen a lot of people get this wrong, is that Aemond has every right to claim Vhagar, despite the fact that we, the audience, do love Helaena, and many of us probably wanted to see little Rhaena claim her. Anyone who's ever delayed a little too long to do something that they know they need to do can probably relate to her plight. I'm sure she was just waiting to grow a little older to claim her, or probably had some other reason like that, but of course she waited too long. And this really was a case of you snooze, you lose. The early bird gets the worm, the dragon. So yeah, there is absolutely no such thing as inheritance right to a specific dragon. And it's always been the case that any Targaryen can claim any dragon, if the dragon will accept you, of course, which isn't a given. A dragon is not a slave, as Daenerys says, and it's always been up to the dragon to accept the would-be rider or not. And that's something we'll see very clearly in Season 2 or 3, when some people try to claim some of the unclaimed dragons. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one. So Aemond, he risked his life in order to try to claim Vhagar, and she accepted him. So that's 100% his bonded dragon now, and no one has any right to say otherwise. So no, Aemond didn't steal Vhagar, although we can certainly understand why Baela and Rhaena might feel that way. That's just not how it works, unfortunately. Rhaena had a chance to claim Vhagar in Pentos or on Driftmark, but didn't. And shame on Daemon for not encouraging her more to do that, by the way. And so this left the opening for anyone else with Targaryen blood to try to claim Vhagar. Therefore, at the moment that Aemond comes strolling back into the cave like a boss, he has done absolutely nothing wrong. And the other kids really had no right to waylay and gang up on Aemond on his way back to the castle. Now, it's understandable that they did, and I don't think they necessarily set out to beat up Aemond, and surely not to maim him, but rather just to confront him. It's just that they didn't think about what would happen if they did because, well, they're kids, and they were upset. Really, I think the whole scene is very well written in the way it escalates unintentionally in the manner that fights between kids sometimes do. So just to go blow by blow, the kids confront Aemond, wrongly as I said, with the Velaryon girls talking to him first, and Aemond responds by hurling some pretty vicious insults back at them, including a crass reference to their mother Helaena being dead. The girls, still grief-stricken, predictably explode at this, with one shoving Aemond and the other punching him. I think it was Rhaena that shoved him and Baela that hit him. But then, of course, Aemond punches back, and pretty hard. And this then causes Jace to rush in to the defense of his cousins, as he should. After all four kids succeed in ganging up to get Aemond on the ground, kicking and punching away with all the fury that 10-year-olds can muster, Aemond eventually summons up his new dragon power and throws them all off one by one. He finishes with grabbing Lucerys by the throat, picking up a big rock, and then, instead of striking him, he turns to insulting Jacaerys about their paternity and calls them bastards. Now, anyone who's ever been ganged up on understands picking up a weapon at this moment. But a rock is obviously a deadly weapon, so even though he doesn't strike Luke with it, Jace responds by pulling the knife. And that's when Aemond hits Jace in the face with the rock. A moment later, Aemond has the upper hand, he's got the rock raised in his hand, and he's hurling threats at Jace, but he doesn't strike him. And that's when Jace throws sand in Aemond's face, and Luke picks up the knife and uses it to cut Aemond's eye. Obviously, Lucerys was unjustified in doing that. He could have killed him. And I really think it should count in Aemond's favor that twice he had a chance to hit a fallen foe with his rock and instead held up. So the whole thing really just spirals out of control perfectly. just as the dance of the dragons will. And in the end, all the kids had a bit of a hand in causing the fight to escalate to the point where Aemond was so badly hurt. After all, even though I just defended Aemond, he had to know that claiming Vhagar would potentially cause conflict, and he also had to know that insulting the girl's dead mother and calling Rhaenyra's children bastards, those were fighting words. He knew that. So again, everyone had a hand in it. And of course, it's even harder for the adults than it is for us to sort everything out, since they didn't witness it blow for blow as we did.
Who did this?
Don't touch me! He attacked Baylor!
Bro, look at us!
Turn me down!
And then of course, Viserys doesn't even try. And really, all of this just feels very realistic. In any case, like I said, I'm trying to schedule a live stream for this Friday or Saturday with 1 or 2 guests so that we can take a minute to understand each kid's perspective throughout the episode and what they went through. But I've seen some pretty harsh and awful takes about Aemond this week, so I did just want to lay out that he did in fact have every right to claim Vhagar, and that the other kids really were out of line for ambushing him on the way home, whatever their intent. So I think people really need to lay off this young dragon who absolutely stole the show this week, and instead just admire the character. Grown-up dragon rider Aemond, whom we'll meet on next week's episode, really will end up being something like the Daemon for the green side. And that's why they had Otto call him that rogue Aemond. The way that House of the Dragon is shaping his adult character really is just fabulous. So I hope everyone is enjoying it as much as Aemond did his dragon ride on Nanny Vhagar. As for that dragon ride, I really loved how the interaction turned. Aemond is using the Valyrian commands for obey / serve and calm down, and so Vhagar lets him climb up. But then it's like, oh, okay, so you wanted to ride a dragon, huh? Well, we'll just see how serious you are. Actually, you know what? I have the hidden audio from that interaction, so let's just play that. Helena, is it time to burn Pentos? Yeah. Oh, hello, little boy. What's your name? Okay, this makes a lot more sense with the Vhagar audio turned up with our special audio enhancement technology. Let's play this other clip. Well, I am sad we can't burn Pentos. I wanted to do Pentos. Do Tyros? You want to do Tyros? Okay, well, Lycetti, we can burn the Lycetti too. Oh, I like the cut of your jib, little Aemond. I really don't know why they cut all this good Vhagar dialogue out of the episode. I mean, I hope this is on the, unreleased bonus footage after the season's over. Looks like we've got one more clip. So fast? You want to go so fast? Okay. If you say go higher. So fast? Okay. Well, if you say so. So, in all seriousness, I really do love how Aemond is hanging on for dear life and how his screams of fright turn to exhilaration. Just absolutely amazing scene from start to finish. One of the best that we've ever seen on Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. And just real quick, as to Aemond's character, it's really interesting to see how seriously he takes everything, in contrast to his older brother, Aegon. Aegon has grown up thinking Rhaenyra is going to be the heir for all of his life, so he kind of acts like a second son. He's just, enjoying the life of the prince, philandering, yawning in dragon training practice. That's why he's Aegon. But Aemond seems to have grown up with more influence from Alicent. And he's already strapped and ready for war, it looks like, at the age of 9. And it's interesting to note that when Aegon was kicked awake out of a drunken stupor by Otto, he first assumed that it was Aemond kicking him. So Aemond is already parenting his older brother, if you will, looking down on him like somebody he needs to look after, just as Aemond is when he's trying to remind Aegon of the importance of treating his future queen, Helena, with respect, and how marrying brother to sister will strengthen the bloodline of the dragon. Minty thinks Aemond might have a crush on Helena, but we'll see. Now that Aemond has Vhagar, well, let's just say a star was born this week. Aemond and Vhagar will be a force to be reckoned with for the remainder of this show, so strap on your eye patch or buckle up to hate it, whichever suits you. And here we go. It's really him, Aemond One Eye Targaryen, the Green Dragon.
And we can make sandwiches out here on the deck.